Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where we are continuing in the process of preparing our pieces to eventually assemble what I think is going to be a really amazing field pack. Okay. Now, one of the design parameters of this field pack is that everything is field repairable with the minimum number of breakable metallic parts, snaps, zippers, etc. Okay. I don't like those things on field equipment. They're great while they work, but when they fail, if they fail when you're out in the woods, you're cooked, right? That just you can't fix snaps in the forest. So instead of zippers and snaps and stuff like that, we're going to be using tie downs for the majority of the fasteners in our pack. Okay. We're going to use some buckles in the shoulder straps because there's no avoiding it there, but buckles are pretty resilient. But we're going to avoid all snap and zipper type items by using tie downs. In order to use tie downs, we need grommet holes. Okay, so this is the flap pocket closure. It's the flat flap. Okay, this is the flat flap, and you can see we have two grommet holes. Now, also in honor of wanting to avoid a whole bunch of metallic parts that you have to purchase and can fail, we're going to use a sewn-in eyelet. Okay? The advantage, everything has an advantage and a disadvantage, and when you're engineering an item, it's always a compromise. Okay? So when I'm thinking about these things, I'm always operating on the assumption that everything will fail over time, right? All things are impermanent. That's just true. So I'm not thinking about how do I prevent this from ever failing. I'm thinking about how do I design it so that it fails in the way I want it to. Because it will fail in time. Metallic grommets fail by tearing the cloth to which they're attached. Okay? They don't wear through. They, don't wear out. The cloth around them gets weakened by the fact that you have a wear point. Okay? So when you have two items of radically different flexibility, where they meet is a wear point. So they wear through the cloth right at the margin of the metallic grommet, and then they rip out a large chunk of cloth. So now you're not just repairing a grommet, you're patching a large chunk of cloth and then repairing a grommet. Okay? So with the sewn-in eyelet style, this fails as friction from your tie wears through the stitches. And since these stitches are overlapping and encasing the edge of the fabric remains intact, and you can just snip a couple stitches and restitch it, which you can absolutely do in the field if you have a little sewing kit, and a little sewing kit is something you should have in your pack. Okay, so that is absolutely a field repairable part. Now to do this, we have a grommet, we have overstitching. The grommet is a little rope insert, and I'll show you how to make these. This is the size that we're using in this project, but this technique can go any size you want, right? This is not for this project. I wanted to learn a new splice and how to miscut, right? So I'm just tinkering. But, depending on what you're doing, you can take this process to any scale you desire. Much smaller than this and much larger than this. Okay? So I'm going to do these as a standalone video because this is a skill which has usefulness, independent of just a build along with this pack that we're making. So we're going to make some grommets, conclude this video, and then we'll jump back into the backpack with making the rest of the parts in the next video. So come along and let's stitch some holes. So this is the finished grommet, but before we start stitching one of these directly onto the cloth, we need the actual rope grommet insert, and that's this. Okay? Now we're just using a twine to make these. When these were done back in the day in big old, sail sheets, they'd be using fairly substantial rope to make these rope grommets. Okay, this is a little hole in a little flap that's going to get tied together with shoelaces. So we don't need to go to any kind of crazy extreme. We just need it to be thick enough and sturdy enough, to be fairly rigid and easy to work with and easy to sew onto. Okay. So we're just making this out of some regular jute kitchen twine. I don't know what brand this was. This was 450 feet for $2.50. So, we're not looking at a really hard to find or expensive material. We want to get out, kind of a, about an arm length or so of this stuff. And this, as is more than strong enough to do what we need to do, but it's a little flimsy just in terms of its own internal strength and rigidity. Right? I mean, not so much strength as in terms of tensile strength, but we want it to be able to actually hold the circle that we want it to hold, okay, and stay put. And this stuff is just a little too floppy. So what we're going to do first, before we start twisting our grommet, is we're going to double this and make a slightly thicker twine. To double this over, we're just going to do a simple leg twist. So on the back of my leg, I'm going to fold this piece of thin twine in half, separate the ends, and then just take my palm and roll it across my leg. And then once you've done that, you can just let it twist. Just kind of counter twist it a little bit with the thumb on your other hand. Hold the pinch with your fingers, move it back up, do it again. This works better if you're wearing shorts than if you're wearing jeans, but it works well enough either way. It's a little chilly out today. It's a little chilly in here, so I'm going to wear jeans. Okay. Doesn't have to be super tight. All we really need is enough twisting to hold the pieces together as a unit. Okay, good enough. Now to start our circle, we're just going to take these two ends, and I did just knot that off quick so it doesn't untwist while I'm working on it. Okay, divide it in half. Bend these against each other, and I'm just using my pointer finger as a gauge. This can be any size you want, but I'm using it on the fattest knuckle of my pointer finger, so that's a reference I always have with me. If I lose that, I'm probably not twisting this way on that day anyway. So it's just a little size gauge that I always have with me. Don't need to take a measurement, don't need to do anything fancy. Okay, so we make that loop, and now we take the end and we're going to twist around that loop with the twist spaced in such a way that there's one rope thickness gap between the twists. Okay. Just like so. Now it's going to want to twist and kind of, do stuff like that on you at this point. But now we're going to take the other length, we're going to twist in the opposite direction the same way, and fill in all of those gaps. And since this is all going to be completely hidden by stitching, it does not have to be perfect. Okay? So there's our basic grommet. Now, right here's a big lump, so I'm going to organize that. And this knot is going to get in the way, so I'm going to take that out. Okay. There's a little bit more organized. Now you can kind of just do this, and it will just seat those cords into each other. Even things out, just rolling them between your fingers. Okay. Play with that as much as you want. Get it as smooth as you want. If we were going to take this and do a bunch of hitching around it, and this was going to be the finished thing, I would care a lot more. But till we do all of this stitching around it, all of this is going to be compressed and collapsed down into itself, and you're not going to see any of that detail. Okay? So to finish it off, we just take these two ends, okay, that are crossing here, and we do one half hitch. Okay, just simple overhand knot and pull them tight. Okay, I'm going to roll this around, just kind of get it straight. If it wants to do like a twist around itself and do a figure eight, you can usually just kind of roll it a half turn against that figure eight and it will sit and stay. Okay, there. Nice, neat, organized grommet. Now, we want to trim these ends a little bit to two different lengths. There's a little bit of a taper. We'll just cut that loop. Then cut a little bit for one of the ends. Okay? And we're going to leave it like that. Again, if this was going to be a decorative piece in and of itself, and we were doing this in larger rope, there's a tucking procedure you can use to tuck these ends in, but we're just going to overstitch this whole thing. We're just going to lash those ends down in the stitching. Okay, so we're not going to do that on these. And then this one I made my ropes a little too long. That one I made them a little bit too short. The same thing here. We'll just cut those off. And then cut one shorter than the other, so there's a little taper when we stitch it down. And that one's ready to go. Okay, so there's our two rope grommets. Now, if I pull these side flaps away, you can see I've done a little bit of the prep work here already. So I took one of these, it was actually this one, and put it on your flap where you want the grommet to go. And this is a place where you have freedom. You could do as many of these as you want. You could do one in the middle, that would be absolutely justified. You could do one in each corner, that would be absolutely justified. You could do 2 quarters and one in the middle. I just did these 4 fingers in and 1 thumb up because that's what looked good to my eyeballs. But you have a lot of freedom in here, and where you put these grommets is not going to screw up the pattern one way or the other. But what we want to do is hold your grommet down and then take a pencil and trace around the outside and the inside. Okay? You can see those 2 lines here and here. Outside tracing, inside tracing. And then go back to your sewing machine and using one of its small stitch setting, do a set of stay stitches around the inside and a second set of stay stitches around the outside. Okay, that's going to keep this from fraying after we cut it. And then you can cut it with a scissors or with a knife. What we're going to do is go from stay stitch to stay stitch. We're going to cut a series of pie wedges. Okay. Just like we're slicing up a pie. Pie. Okay. So now these, I missed one. You can do this with the scissors too if you have a nice pointy scissors. Okay? See, there's our hole. Now, I want to just kind of pull on the ends of these. Just anything which wants to pull off and fray out, I'm going to let. But just as I'm going to let the ends of these cords, just be loose and get stitched in, I'm going to let the ends of these little frayed threads be loose and get stitched in. Okay? So that's why I'm not just cutting out this ring, because I want to trap those threads, stitch them down to further reinforce this grommet. Okay? You can cut that whole ring out. That is possible. But I'd rather have those and stitch them up in and have a little bit more strength, a little bit more tying together of the fabric and the insert. Okay? So that's how the cloth is prepared. And then to prepare the string, what we're going to do is, again, we're going to take a length of this same twine that we made the grommet from. And this is a good thickness. But if I double this over in the needle, it's going to be devilishly hard to pull through. So, let me get my needle. Here's my needle. We're going to untwist it, unlay this twine. Okay. Now this particular batch of jute twine, I like to thread immediately as soon as I start to unlay it, because it's a bit on the loose side and it can kind of come unglued a little too easy. So we're just going to thread that, wet it a little bit, right off the bat. Okay, just like so, and yes, that editing cut means I had to fuss with it a little bit, but you can see how loose and frayed out this other side is already becoming. Okay, a lot of this, jute and sisal twine, these yarns aren't that well twisted. So now we're just going to pull this apart, and as we go, we're going to advance the needle for the same reason till we get to the halfway mark. Okay, so I'm at the halfway point, so now I'm just going to unlay the rest of this without moving the needle any further. Okay, and here's what we end up with. We have one piece that's split and on the needle, and then the other piece here. Now, you can see just how loose this has become, and this twine is not it's not really well twisted, and it's not that sturdy. Sometimes I can get the backside on a needle and use it too. Sometimes while I'm working with one and doing the first half of the sewing, this just gets so frahoodled that it's just a loss. But again, we're not dealing with a wildly expensive material. So now we want to take this and do a leg twist to relay it and reform the twine, just like we did when we were doubling the cord for the rope grommet. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go do that off camera, and we'll look at sewing. I hope that you're enjoying this content, and if you are, I would love to invite you to join our Patreon page and the community over there. The Patreon and that funding is super important for this channel as well as most YouTube channels. It just takes resources to do these things, to buy materials, to go on trips, to go interview people, to do activities, and we're trying to build and make the channel better in all of those categories. So we're super grateful for everybody who is already there. And if you would like to come and join the ranks of those folks, we have a lot of rewards for the folks who do join on the Patreon. We have a large repository of historic information on traditional skills that have been re-indexed and edited and produced in easy-to-print formats, and formats that are easy to put into a page reader, and it's indexed by skill rather than all of the random ways that it was indexed in the past, so you could access what you want. We also have a lot of plans and patterns for various projects, like this shoulder bag that we're going to replicate here soon. The fur stretchers behind me are another example, and all of that library becomes an infinite access resource to you when you join the Patreon at any of the paid tiers, even at $1 a month. If you don't want to join that way, they can be purchased as individual downloads as well. And we're just so grateful for everybody who's there and wanted to invite you. So, hope to see you there, but I also hope you're enjoying this video, which we'll get back to right now. We have our little thing cut out, we have our little grommet, we have our thread prepared. Now, to get started, we're going to start from the back, and we're basically doing a ring bolt hitch, but stitching it along rather than just tying it around a core. So you could start anywhere in this that you want. And again, I have a row of it's going to be very difficult to see in the camera if you could see it all, but you might just have to take my word for it. Right here, I'm pointing to a ring of stay stitches on the inside of the grommet. And right here's a ring of stay stitches on the outside of the grommet. And I'm going to start just by passing the twine through at any location you like in between those two rows of stay stitches. And since this is knotted to keep those together, that's just a natural stopper knot there on the back. Knots are not ideal in this because they make lumps. Those lumps can be wear points. But again, I'm just going to be tying this down with a shoelace. So I'm going to keep my knot kind of to the back where there shouldn't really ever be any real abrasion back here. Right. Now, as we get started here, we're going to be going down through the fabric and then up along the back line of stay stitches. Okay, so we're going to put the grommet on here. We're going to go down through everything and then up in the back. Okay, and through one thickness, this sail needle does a pretty good job of going through without needing a stitching palm for this particular operation. Okay, so that is going to tie down our grommet. Now as we go along, these little tails, we're just going to stitch them right down as we go through this pattern. Okay, so now we're going to do it again, down, and then up adjacent to where that thread came out. Okay, but now we want our twine to be behind the needle. And this is what's going to lock, this is what's going to tie a little half hitch each time to produce the ring bolt hitch pattern. Okay, cinch that up good. Okay, so now you can see the loop we just cinched up is over top of the standing end of our thread. Do it again. Down the hole, up the line of stay stitches, being one like half hitch width over. Okay. Don't worry about catching your thread initially because we're just going to loop it around the needle before we pull it on through. Adjust it, take the time to make sure that each of these is right where you want it, because they don't cooperate well in terms of sliding them from side to side. Now when I pull this hitch up, you can see I'm just kind of pulling it across the loop, and the back of that loop is kind of coming forward a little bit, right? But now when I pull this down to make the next stitch, it pulls that back to the cloth, and that's the final tensioning on your stitch. Okay, do one more. Okay, now let's say we pull this through and we forget to loop over. Well, then we could just kind of come through, grab it like we're tying a knot, and it comes out just as nice.
I can see it.
Yeah. A lot of sun coming in the window. All right, so it comes out just as nice. And these half hitches are where we get this nice little pattern that you can see along the outside of the grommet circle. Okay, so I am going to go use up this bit of twine, and then I'll show you how we switch and keep going if we don't have enough twine to go all the way around the circle on one needle. Now, this was a bit short, so it didn't take me long to run out. The next thing that we need to do to finish off this thread and start the next one is we're going to go directly down right underneath the current stitch. Okay? Just going to pass it right through the cloth. And remember how the loop there has a tendency to pull up? That's why we want to do this way. So that'll tie that down to the fabric itself. Now we flip it over, and we're going to come to the next stitch behind, pull a loop, and then you got to make sure you leave yourself just enough that you can get a half hitch in here. There we go. Okay, so a little half hitch along the thread. We're just going to take the thread, pass it under a number of stitches. And yes, that was deliberately non-specific, just a number of stitches. Pull that down in. And then snip it close. Okay? So there's that one finished off. Stick my needle somewhere I'm not going to lose it. Sail needles are not the cheapest things.
Also don't want them in your foot.
Also don't want them in your... Yeah, they are very, very sharp. And they need to be kept that way. These can be sharpened and maintained for a long period of time. Okay? Now I'm going to do basically the same thing, but in reverse, to start the next thread. So I'm going to pass through a number of stitches. Pull it up like almost to the knot. Snip off the tail end of this. Tug it in just enough that those tags hide. And now I'm going to go up through the loop we just pulled down on that previous stitch. Okay, right through here. Find it right. Almost. I know it's out of view. But I have to be able to see it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you can see the point is coming right up through that little loop. Okay? So pull it down taut. Okay, and now we can resume stitching just as we had been. We do 2 or 3 here. And these are very secure even just with a tucked thread. With a fairly thin twine like I'm using, I can get away with tying a half hitch if I want to. But if you get any thicker than this, tying any kind of knot whatsoever just makes such an awful lump that you just don't want to do it. Okay, so there's 3 more stitches. Here's where we switched from one twine to the next. Stitch, stitch, stitch. and you can see it carries right along. And because we know where we finished off and started over, we can see a little spot there. But if I just handed this to you, you wouldn't be able to pick out where I finished off and started over. Okay? So I'm just going to keep going around, and then we will look at, finishing off the final thing when the pattern completes back at the top. We've come all the way around, got back to our starting stitch, passed the needle back through, just like previously when we joined yarns there, joined twines. And now we're on the back, we're right here, quick half hitch, pull this all the way through. Okay. Nestle it all in, snip it off. And we have ourselves a sewn grommet. Okay. Now it got a little bit lumpy in a couple places because I had to join 3 twines because the first one was a little too short, but you can't see that on the front of it. Okay. So now we repeat the process until we have as many lacing holes in our canvas as we want. So there you go. Now you know how to make your own stitched eyelets in your projects. We've done the 2 for the flat flap. Okay. Then we have our 2 side pieces, okay, with these little flaps that will fold down in like so for cinching the pack in at the top. And we have our 2 grommet holes in the main flap. Okay, so I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you've learned something along with it, and I hope that we'll see you here next time at Old Ways Rising Farm.
Sound check. 1, 2, 3. You want to do a sound check? Instead of hitting your head?